Hello,
Mr.
Brian.
Keo, hello.
Hello, hello. Fancy meeting you here.
Fancy meeting you here. I did get the memo to pull the hair back, so we can match today.
We're in the Miami Vice mode today.
It's true. My Testarossa is just parked over there, and
Indeed.
my pink shirt. I have to pick it up from the dry cleaners. I'll be ready to go.
Yep. Good. Good. I'm glad.
It's great to see you, John. Looks like travels are starting to open up in some regard. I'm coming to you from New York. I understand that you're going to Norway here coming up.
Yeah, I'm waiting for credentialing to occur because U.S. QR codes are not acknowledged in Europe. So in California, we have a QR code based COVID certificate, but there's no reciprocity with the EU or with Norway. However, I just learned yesterday, this is like the COVID underground, that if you stop off in London and you go to a pharmacy and you are persuasive, they will give you a national health system certificate, which you could then hop back on the plane and use in Norway. I'm going to short circuit all of that by having a letter from the Ministry of Trade and Industry saying I'm an essential guest. And
I suppose if you could do that, that is one way to do it.
The only problem would be if I ran into an immigration guy who was feeling so low in the totem pole that he had to assert himself by denying me or making me quarantine for 10 days, which would totally defeat the purpose of going. But anyway, I'd say the chances are about 90% now that I will be going to Norway, which I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, that's exciting. I have to talk to you about the QR code because I think I missed that memo. And now
It's
though,
complicated. I'm an expert on it now.
yeah, and now I'm wondering if that booster shot is going to come soon enough because I'm starting to, I'm getting towards that end of the 6-month program there where I'm worried about ongoing travel and I'm making decisions accordingly.
I got my booster 2 months ago, Brian.
Just ahead of the game. QR codes, boosters, letters from the ministry to visit the country. That's fantastic. Well, let me take this moment to welcome everybody to Intersections. Our first guest is backstage, and this is a wonderful time where once a week we get together, John and I, as well as incredible guests who blow our minds consistently every week. So thank you for being here. If you do have a moment, please browse through the library at intersectionslive.com because every guest has been phenomenal. Every guest we want back, every guest, the conversations that we've had are still timely, still relevant, and still compelling. And with that said, you are also part of this community. You are what makes this show work. So as you watch, please do share where you're tuning in from, where you are in the world. Me, I'm at the TWA Hotel here in New York, and it is a very cool, very nostalgic hotel. In fact, I'm going to geek out later and just take a million pictures. And with that said, Intersections, your official welcome is coming right now. It is a weekly conversational jam session that dives deep into the intersections among technology, innovation, culture, and ideas. Every week, we bring diverse personalities and worldviews together in the service of greater understanding and unlearning. My co-host and co-founder, John Kao, is an incredible individual to follow. He's on Twitter. He has a Forbes column. He's on LinkedIn. He was called Mr. Creativity by The Economist. These words don't do it justice, but I wanted to start this show with him for a reason. He's a thought leader. He's an entrepreneur and advisor. He's played a prominent role in the fields of innovation and business creativity for over 30 years. And one of the things that I admire about John's work is that yes, he's an innovator. He's an academic. He's written a best-selling book called "Jamming: The Art and Discipline of Business Creativity." He is a Tony-nominated producer of film and stage, and I think that's it. He's taught at MIT Media Lab at Stanford, but more so when he brings his ideas or potential solutions to a problem or to create an opportunity. He brings that business mind, that academic mind, of course, the caliber of which you would expect, but also the slice of artistry is what's also fascinating because that balance between innovation and art and science is, I think, more important now than ever before. So, John Kao, welcome to Intersections.
Hey, Brian. Well, my cheeks are red now. Let me try to reciprocate and see if I can make you blush. I rarely meet people who are as engaged in the world, both the analog world and also the digital social media, digital community world, as Brian, who really has made a career out of um, building on his knowledge of the digital domain and extending it in many, many ways into such topic areas as the future of innovation, the future of marketing, the future of reputation and brand building, the whole notion of what social media, as we know it today, is going to evolve into, which is very much an open question in this era of regulation and techlash and so forth and so on. Brian's network in the innovation field is extraordinary, and I think if you map our networks, I'm sure somebody has software for doing this, you would probably get a complete or a more complete rendition of what it means to try to form an innovation community, which is one of the subtexts of intersections, really, to draw that community together. And with all of that said, Brian has a day job, which is global evangelist for innovation at Salesforce. So, welcome, Brian.
Thank you, John. Yes, my cheeks are red, and also just the act of smiling makes my chin feel better already. I've noticed one thing for sure, that traveling to this is my second in-person presentation since COVID, and there's a pattern. My clothes have shrunk, so we're gonna have to work on that as well. They don't fit like they used to. Now, with all these jokes aside, I'm practicing for a career in stand-up comedy here. Our first guest is Whitney Johnson, and I've known Whitney for quite a long time. We're members of a very wonderful group in Silicon Valley. And gee, let's just go ahead and bring her on, and I'll introduce her. Whitney Johnson is the CEO of Human Capital Consultancy, Disruption Advisors. She's a Thinkers 50, just a brilliant mind. She's the author of several books, Dare, Dream, Do, Disrupt Yourself, Build an A-Team, and her latest book, which I believe comes out, we'll hear from Whitney, I think it's the first quarter of next year, called Smart Growth, How to Grow Your People to Grow Your Company. And if there is a topic to have right now, it is about the importance of people in this new economy. Whitney, welcome to Intersections.
Oh, thank you. And I am so delighted to be here and to hear how you were each making each other blush as we went along. That was very fun.
Well, Whitney, we're going to change the name of the program to something to do with blush, because we're just wonderfully blessed to have you here on the show. I mean, thank you so much for taking time. So I guess one place to start, and then we'll just dive into all of the things that you're working on, is share with us your background and your passion on what you do every day when you're not writing and speaking about the
what I do every day when I'm not writing and speaking. Okay, let me give you a quick background on me. So I actually grew up in San Jose. I saw there was someone on here who is Mital is coming from San Jose. So I grew up in San Jose and went to Leland High School, for those of you who know the area. And my background is that I actually majored in music in college. And so super expected, right? Major in music at college, but graduate. My husband and I moved to New York so he can get his PhD at Columbia University. And when we got there, I thought, well, we need to put food on the table. I guess I'm the person who's supposed to put food on the table. Ends up that I have trouble getting a job because I was a music major. So I started out as a secretary working for a Wall Street broker at Smith Barney, 1345 Avenue of the Americas. Well, what then happened next is really the beginning of what we're going to talk about today. Is I would sit across from this bullpen of young stockbrokers, aspiring masters of the universe, and they were saying things like, throw down your pom-poms and get in the game, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know this makes a lot of sense. And of course, I'm super offended because I was a cheerleader in high school. But in all seriousness, as I heard them say this over and over again, I realized I needed to throw down my pom-poms. And so started taking business courses at night, accounting, finance, and eventually had a boss who believed in me, which allowed me to move from secretary to investment banker. And I would not have known to call it this then, but that was really the beginning of me disrupting myself, disrupting my mindset of what I thought would be possible. And then just very quickly, fast forward, did banking for several years, became an equity analyst, institutional investor ranked, stock picker, and then disrupted myself to become an entrepreneur, connected with Clayton Christensen at Harvard Business School, and co-founded the Disruptive Innovation Fund with him. And then about almost 10 years ago now, disrupted myself again and realized I wanted to take these ideas of disruption that we were applying to products and services, thought, I think these actually also apply to people. And I wanted to double down on that. So I'd written an article in Harvard Business Review called Disrupt Yourself. And now for the last 10 years, I've been building out this IP around personal disruption, around the S-curve of learning, and coaching and consulting around these ideas. So that is my background in a nutshell.
And that is an incredible background indeed. And it's always been an important topic, but I gotta imagine that your phone is figuratively blowing up right now. In that, for example, some of the most interesting conversations that I'm having now are to do with one of two things: reskilling, and also figuring out where to get talent, and in the absence of talent, applying robots to the job, and things that wouldn't have been on the horizon or a roadmap for maybe at least a decade are now suddenly being deployed in pilots today. And that idea of personal disruption is one that I take near and dear to my heart. I went through a personal disruption recently in a good way, and have constantly trying to reinvent myself to stay relevant, but also to pursue passions along the way, and chase those opportunities, and maybe even catch a surfboard and ride the next zeitgeist. And it's been a fascinating but also difficult process, and you almost have to be comfortable with uncomfortability.
Wait, what? You just said you went through this massive personal disruption recently, and you just surfed right on past that. Would you please share with us all what your massive personal disruption was?
Well, I think, Whitney, the last time I saw you, I was on the book tour for X, which was about experience innovation and helping businesses reimagine how to compete in a digital first world, but with knowing that the saying digital first was just a complete blur. It's just that we live in a world, and these things are everywhere, and they're changing our lives. But also, shortly after that, I went through this process of understanding how these devices were disrupting us, and where that sapping of creativity was coming from, or where that multitasking was coming from, and why I couldn't be fully present in anything that I was doing. And wrote this book called Life Scale, and it was about the science of reprogramming yourself without getting rid of these things, but reprogramming yourself to be in control of how these things work for you. And long story short, because this is about you today, is that I decided to fold up my analyst and advisory practice, and I joined Salesforce to become their global innovation evangelist, so that I can work with companies at scale, have a bigger impact, and be in control of when I get on a plane, and when I'm with my family. And it was a wonderful transformation. So thank you for asking.
Oh, I love it.
Now, I want to ask you this time where, I mean, people are they're scared and confused because of all the things that are happening in this world. But at the same time, you read headline after headline about the Great Resignation, about how employers can't find staff. You look at the fast food, QSR, the restaurant industry. They can't keep servers or staff, or even hire them. They're paying out bonuses just to show up for interviews.
Yeah.
So what's going on in the state of talent today? And for those people who are listening, we have two, I would imagine, two types of folks: those who are trying to hire talent, and those who are talent
Yeah.
and wondering if this is their moment to disrupt themselves.
So do you want me to talk first about the people who are trying to hire or the people who are resigning?
Let's go with the people that are resigning, because I think that'll help
Okay.
the former.
Okay. Yeah. So the way I think about this is, so I mentioned the framework of personal disruption that I used and adapted from the framework of disruptive innovation. There was another framework that I have developed. It's called the S curve of learning, and it's a reimagination of Rogers' diffusion curve. And basically, the idea is it helps us understand how we learn and how we grow. And so, whenever you start something new, you're at the base of that S, and growth it's happening, but it's going to feel really slow. Put in the time, you hit the knee of the curve, you move into that steep, sleek back of that S where it's exhilarating and everything feels fast as opposed to slow. But then you get to the top of that curve and you start to hit mastery, and growth actually is slowing down. Your dopamine, you're not getting the feel good effects of learning. And so you have to make a decision. Do you find a way to keep climbing, or do you jump to the bottom of a new S curve? Well, what I think has happened over the last couple of years and why the great resignation has taken place is that everyone on the planet, no matter what S curve we were on, we got bumped off that S curve onto a brand new S curve. And while that has been incredibly discombobulating and jarring for all of us, it also has built a lot of momentum. And that's where this idea of post-traumatic stress growth comes in. And so one of the reasons I think that people are resigning is that now that they've got this momentum and they got knocked off the curve, they realized, oh, that wasn't as bad as I thought. Oh, I'm building up this muscle. Oh, I'm learning how to disrupt myself. And now that they know how to do it, they're thinking, I could do it in other places as well. And so we're taking this inventory of our lives and saying, this isn't working for me like it used to. And now that I have this muscle, I feel capable of disrupting myself, of doing something new, of jumping to a new S curve. People are doing it.
Yeah, I think that's the positive side of this disruption, is that it also can make you a little bit more conscious of the path that you've been on.
Mhm.
And sometimes it takes that shock to the system to do that. And now let's go to the employer side of things, because I've been involved in conversations with some very smart people and senior leaders at some of the biggest companies around the world. And there's almost like a state of denial, I'd say. And I say that lovingly, in that, the great, the great, the great resignation.
We're all going to live forever, right?
Oh boy, I don't know if I want to do that. The great resignation is because of stimulus checks. The great resignation is because of politics. The great resignation is for a lot of things other than maybe internalizing things like employee growth, pay, benefits, things like experience and balance. So what are you hearing on that side, and what are some of the things that employers should start to think about now moving forward?
Yeah. Such a great question. Now, so my own bias is that, as you've probably surmised, we want to grow. I mean, growth is our default setting. I'm writing a book called Smart Growth. So what you're about to hear is through Whitney Johnson's lens. At the same time, I think if you look at any individual, you look at surveys, there are lots of things that are going to predict whether or not someone is going to stay at an organization indefinitely. And that is going to depend, in our experience, is one of the biggest predictors is, do I think there is upside, right? I come from a stock background, right? And what we look at is we think, all right, I'm going to buy this stock if I think there are going to be upside surprises. If I think all the value is priced in, I'm going to sell it. If I think there's an opportunity on the upside, I'm going to buy it. And we as individuals, we're always looking for momentum. And so one of the things I think that employers, if we could lock into, is when we hire someone, if we ensure that there is opportunity for them to continue to grow, as long as they want to grow, they are much more likely to stay with us. And the challenge is that we're not always sure how to help them keep growing. And yet, if we would have that conversation, we will find that sometimes they'll say, I do want to continue to grow, but I'm also trying to be a parent. So if I can just come to work and have this be a great place to be, then I'll go on my S curve as a parent and figure this out. Or I want to grow and I can do something lateral. I don't necessarily need to go up. I just need to be able to go sideways. I need to know that there's an opportunity for me to continue to feel effective. And by the way, I especially need to know that if there isn't something for me here, you will care enough about me as a person and as a human being to find me an opportunity to grow somewhere else. Because if you do, I will become an ambassador for you and for the organization. And so I think the challenge is that all of us ourselves are also trying to grow. We're also trying to be the hero of our own story. And it's very difficult for me to get into John's view of the world. It's difficult to get into Brian's view of the world. And what is John trying to get done in the world? What is Brian trying to get done in the world? But if we will do that, if they know that there's an opportunity to grow and we can help that be possible, we're going to be able to hire people and we'll be able to retain them.
You know, John, I definitely, I'm going to pass this over to you. I just have one more question I have to ask, because I'm thinking about your business, right? Mm-hmm. Disruption Advisors.
Yeah.
And both John and I are, well, I can't say that anymore. I'm no longer in the Bay Area full time, but you know, we've been on the forefront of disruption in every form. Mm-hmm. And so now, because you're so plugged into the left side of the bell curve, and usually the work that you're doing is predictive of what are the next trends that we need to pay attention to. So I'm just curious, and John, I promise I'll pass it to you right after this. What are the things that you're being asked to advise on now as we endure this pandemic and as we face this great resignation and as we look at life with COVID for longer than we thought here, but the world is starting to open up? What are some of the things that you're starting to be asked to do or work on more?
Well, the first and probably most, actually, let me back up. You would think that because we talk about disruption, people would want us to come in and help them manage through change. And sometimes that is what they ask us to do. But more frequently, it's organizations, whether they're VC-backed startups or Fortune 100 companies, they're people who want to grow. They're saying, we want to grow. We know we need to grow. We're not quite sure how to start. We're trying to figure out how to retain the people who are at the top of their S curve. How do we help them continue to grow? And so people hire us because they want a model. This S curve of learning is so simple. And because it's simple, it's sticky. It becomes this artifact to have a conversation. And so once they have this common language to talk about growth, then we're able to advise them around talent development, around succession and workforce planning. And so that's where people are inviting us in, is people who want to grow and they want to grow faster.
Yeah, growth is certainly it's on the minds of everyone these days. And I think the interesting thing about it too, or at least a promising thing, I say this all the time, I'm a hopeless optimist, is that I want to believe that there's growth for the business, but also growth through the personal growth of those that we work with as well, so that we all grow together, that rising tide mentality.
Brian, if I can just say one other thing, because I think what you said is really important. That is my thesis, that the fundamental unit of growth in any organization is the individual. And if you will grow yourself, and if you will then grow your people, then your business will grow. It's just, to me, it's indisputable, because what is a company without people?
You'd think.
Well, corporations are people, though.
Exactly. Yeah.
John.
I love that. I thought you were being serious, John.
No. Come on.
People. Wink, wink.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm curious about something from left field in a way. This might feel a little bit coming from left field, but as someone who thought he was going to be a professional musician until age 19 and who still does music, I'm intrigued by the fact that you majored in music in college. And I wonder how your knowledge of music, in whatever form it took or is taking, might have informed some of the work and interests that you are doing today.
I love that question so much. Before I answer it, what's your instrument?
Piano.
Oh,
piano and digital stuff, but mostly acoustic piano.
classical, jazz, both?
Oh, so I started off being a classical piano nerd. I thought I would I was under the delusion that I would become a concert pianist. But I did competitions in high school, WQXR Young Pianist Competition, all that stuff. And then had a stint with a well-known rock and roll band called the Mothers of Invention. They actually invited me to tour with them and record with them when I was 18.
Wow.
And then I retired from music and professional music. But of late, I'm studying weekly and practicing. And my goal is to become proficient as a jazz pianist.
I love it. And are you studying on your, sorry, now I'm taking this off in left field. Are you studying on your own? Are you taking from a teacher?
No. So I have a very good friend named Dan Tepfer, Tepfer. Look him up. He's great. He's extremely, he's going to be too famous shortly to take on, students. And so I feel like I'm in this window where he
Right.
is young enough and early enough in his career that having a few students is really useful. He's an incredible jazz pianist. He's in demand all around the world. So we have to schedule our lessons around his trips to Paris and Slovakia and so on. But he also is an incredible interpreter of Bach. And since he majored in astrophysics in college, he's also a ace computer programmer who does digital music. So I get to kind of scratch every itch in our lessons, although primarily it's about, getting a jazz sense of rhythm, getting a jazz sense of harmony, melody, and building up from what was really an aspiration from my teenage years, wanting to know how to play that beautiful music until now, where I get to scratch that itch.
Oh,
anyway.
I love it. You need to have him on your show.
We will, yeah, for sure. I've done a bunch of video interviews with him because he's also very articulate about the role of practice and creativity and things of this kind. And just not that this is about me and music, but I have a deep desire to help music as a social institution because I think it's in bad shape. And I think music education is in bad shape. I think music technology has kind of flanked a lot of formal music institutions and education. So it's more than just playing the piano at this point. Anyway, so over to you. I'm I'm the table for you.
Yeah. So to answer your question about how does music inform, so I've actually thought about that a number of times, and I would say number one is that, when you grow up and when you're in college and you're practicing piano for 3 hours a day, you get up at 6 a.m. and you practice for 3 hours, not 8 hours, but 3 hours. I mean, it creates a sense of discipline. So I think that's the first thing is that I'm very disciplined. I work very hard and I get up early, all those things. And I think that's a really important skill in terms of being accomplished in no matter what you're doing. The other thing that I would say that it really influences me is I look for musicality. And when I deliver a speech, if there's not some element in terms of the structure, the ABA, so I'm always trying to think of what's the musicality of a speech that I'm delivering? Or, when I'm writing a book and, I read it out loud, does it sound musical to me? And so those are two things that I think about a lot. I think the other thing I think about is I was classically trained as well. And I love listening to jazz. And so there's also that question of how can I, as a person, when I'm delivering a speech or having a conversation, not only have the technique that comes from the classical training, but also the musicality, the improvisation that comes from being a jazz musician and being able to have a conversation like we're having and that call and response and riffing on
music, in notes.
Yeah.
I mean, jamming was really about what leaders can learn from jazz musicians. And when you get into this notion of empathy and collaboration and inspiration and context and many other things, jazz has a lot to teach. Jazz is a lot more than jazz, as I like to say.
And John, you just made me think of one other thing I realized is that I've done a lot of accompanying of vocalists over the years. And I think that creates that empathy, right? Because you're listening to the vocalist or the musician singing and you're anticipating what they're going to sing next or play next. And that creates this ability to to sense what people are going to say or do.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to be a kind of a humble participant in a way. I mean, even if you're incredibly musical, because it's not just about you, it's about the whole, which is, there are lessons there as well. Well, I'm sure we could have a very much longer conversation about music, but I'm also interested in kind of shifting gears to something that you kind of slipped in passing, which I think is quite important, which is you said something about uh, um, finding ways to leverage IT in some of the business models that you're um, engaged with and with your advisory firm. I mean, the reason that I mentioned that is because you're a unique resource. So I'm sure if somebody were getting coached by you, they get a lot of value. And then if you start thinking about leveraging this knowledge in a somewhat consistent way, and then also linking it to learning assets and career path and kind of career growth and other matters. There's a lot of discussion these days about the uses of digital platforms and AI activated market spaces and machine learning approaches to upskilling and things of this kind. So I wonder specifically what your thoughts are about IT in relation to your business, and more generally, what you think the future of some of this kind of growth of potential is in a world that's increasingly influenced by digital capabilities.
Yeah. Okay. So interestingly enough, I meant to say IP, intellectual property.
Oh, okay.
But here's what's interesting. If I didn't, then it may have been a Freudian slip, because we actually have a tech-enabled platform which has that S curve on it that you can take a diagnostic, see where you are in your growth, look at what accelerants are going to, like, where are you on the mountain of your growth on the S curve? What accelerants do you have that are going to equip you to move up that mountain? And then also, what are the weather patterns? What is the ecosystem that you can have an entire team or organization take? And then you as a leader or manager can look at that and say, are my people equipped for growth? Where do they think they are in their growth? Where do I think they are? And that becomes a conversation. So to answer your question, we absolutely see not only IP, but also IT.
Okay.
As a tech-enabled services company that will allow people to be able to, smart growth, smart device, when you know where you are in your growth. And this is in many ways the emotional arc of where you are in your growth, then you increase your capacity to grow. And to your question, I absolutely think that there will over time be opportunities to use AI, et cetera, to monitor this growth. And I get really excited about there. As you can see, I've got a Whoop band on, and it does make a difference, right? Since I started monitoring my sleep, I sleep more because I realize I need to recover. So it really does affect your capacity to grow when you start monitoring.
Absolutely. There's also the Aura Ring. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
I haven't.
Yeah.
How is that?
Oh, Aura Ring is almost like an alter ego for wellness. I mean, you wear it; it's got sensors on it, but it gives you very complete 7x24 reporting about what your preparedness for the day is. It breaks down the quality of your sleep into a number of different variables, and it's kind of like your companion in a way.
Yeah.
Anyway, and it's just the beginning. I mean, I think that this
yeah.
notion of digital self representation, feedback loops, et cetera. I mean, I'm looking at a couple of business plans right now for internet on the body and 7x24 wellness, and it's just a very exciting time.
It really is.
So one other question, and then maybe Brian and I will kind of double team beyond that is, I mean, I taught at Harvard Business School for quite a while. I knew Clay Christensen. And he was very big on values and how do you measure your life and things of this kind. And I'm kind of wondering, growth for its own sake, like I'm going to be more senior or make more money, or my company's going to be more profitable, or it's going to be bigger, is kind of problematic to me unless it's guided by values and there's a sense of purpose around it. So I wonder specifically what Clay's influence might have been on your thinking about values, but also what your sense is of what I would call moral intelligence in terms of, marrying that to the notion of growth?
What a great question. So I think the first thing, one of the challenges that I sometimes have in my work, and this has actually happened to me in 2 out of my 3 books, is that I write the books with this a priori assumption that moral integrity is in place. And 2 different times, in fact, I'll give you an example with my most recent book. One of my, I'm in a mastermind group with Harry Kramer, who is the former CEO of Baxter Healthcare. And so he knows me and how I think. And he read an early draft of the manuscript and he said, Whitney, he said, I know you're a very spiritual person. You have, deep faith. He said, I don't see that anywhere in this book. I was like, oh. Because for me, of course it's there, but it's not, of course it's there. And so I think to your point, and interestingly enough, my husband's a cancer biologist. And so I know all about, bad growth, right? Metastasizing, cancerous, algae-ridden plant kinds of growth. That is obviously not what I'm advocating for. And to your, bring it back to Clay and the comment that you made, I think one of the most important, I learned many things from Clay. I got to work very closely with him for about 6 or 7 years. But I think the most important thing that I learned from him is that he did not separate the secular and the spiritual. To him, they were the same. He would bring, church to work and work to church. Like they were all the same. He lived in that respect. It was a very authentic life. And so one of the things that for me is very important, and I hope is increasingly apparent, not just in my mind, the importance of values when it comes to growth and something that has a moral center. It's very, very important.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's nice to believe that you can assume a moral compass on the part of everybody you meet, but sadly, I have found that not to be true at all. So, understanding what motivates in terms of the value constellation that someone lives their lives by is both important and not something that's readily understood, at least, right at the outset. And the same goes for organizations who, may have started in the throes of great enthusiasm for a vision and a sense of purpose, but, grow and become more complex to the point where people have lost sight of those original values in serving the beast. I mean, you see this in our current version of the military-industrial complex, which started out, with a very moral purpose, which was to defend democracy and keep the lines of international commerce open, and now has become this self-perpetuating machinery for generating more and more contracts and more growth for its own sake, because that's how people measure success. So I think that's real important. Well, I'll get your address at some point if you want. I can send you a copy of Jamming, which I think now that
I would love that.
You would appreciate.
I would love it.
And with that, Brian, maybe we should just see if there's any kind of double team stuff we want to put on the table at this point. I know, we're happy that Whitney is able to stay with us a little bit longer, but what's on your mind, Brian?
I mean, so much.
Maybe we should jam a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I often have the video camera next to the piano. As a matter of fact, I set that up because I do all my lessons on Zoom, but it's not that accessible at this moment.
Oh, that would be fun. I think someone asked you to play, didn't they?
Well, the music on the front end is me, the piano.
For real?
Yeah, it is. He wrote, composed and recorded instantly our intro and outro.
Late at night, I was
pretty
under
good jazz to me.
Yeah, well, I mean, I have high standards, right? So I'm constantly, expecting more of myself.
It is. I actually want to make John a guest.
I know. I think you should, and make him play.
Yes, absolutely. Well, there's a question that I want to ask that was prompted by John's question about values, and kind of bringing my own transformation into the mix here. One of the things that I didn't realize was how living a digital in a digital world has a tendency subconsciously to push you away from your core values without even noticing. And sort of reassessing where you are in life, and where you really want to go, and maybe recalibrating that trajectory. It was really, really interesting. And I subsequently did a lot of research, for example, with women ages 6 to 60, and trying to understand how their favorite apps like Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat,
Yeah.
how those apps were affecting their own definition of beauty, how it affected their self-esteem, how it affected their routines, their beauty routines and regimens. And I learned so many not so good things about how we're sort of being, I don't want to use the word coerced, but I guess, pushed to live a certain life,
Swayed.
swayed a certain life at a certain pace in a certain way, uh, without necessarily realizing that our own core values are being pushed out. And I guess this is a long setup, Whitney, to just ask, how do we know when it's time to look within? How do we know when it's time to maybe
Mm,
grow? Because I
mm,
learned, when I learned, it was because it was the sum of a lot of bad decisions. So
yeah.
I had an uh-oh moment.
I think the short answer, Brian, is every single day, every single minute. I mean, one of the things for me, I remember when I first was starting to transition from doing stock analysis to basically moving into human potential, because that's what I do now, right? I mean, if you think about it at its core, it's about human potential and growth. And I had a very wise person say to me, my mother, she said, if you're going to do this, you need to make sure you walk your talk. And
Mm,
so I think that if I am not willing to continually look within, and I think this goes to the point of, if we're going to climb that mountain, if we're going to move up that S curve, if we're going to have any moral authority as a leader, we need to continually be disrupting ourselves. And when I say disrupting ourselves, I mean in that micro way of, are we willing to step back in order to grow, meaning step back in order to reflect, step back to think about, what do I need to do differently? Oh, that conversation I just had with my colleague, did I actually pay attention to them? Or my husband just came in and wanted my attention and I brushed him off because I was busy doing something else. Did I apologize? Like those little micro disruptions of continually looking in and asking ourselves, what am I doing not only to get better at work, at speaking or evangelizing or playing the piano or whatever it is, but am I getting better as a human being? And
mm,
so to me the answer is we look inside every single day. And when we do, and this is why I think it's so important, is not only will we be happier, but then when these big disruptions come, these big displacements in the world that create this sense of upheaval, we will be okay, because we will have a center and it will allow us to navigate through it.
So that's an optimistic statement. I just had dinner with my philosophy preceptor from undergraduate days after a long hiatus, obviously.
Yep.
And, his whole field is ethics and a little bit of Hegel thrown in. And he feels, I said, we seem to be in an era where there is no common canon of moral standards. We don't have a commonly accepted ethical framework. And he said, I absolutely agree. And I don't think we can get there. I mean, it was a very pessimistic view of this, because the notion of a unitary body of ethical precepts just seems to elude us at this point. I mean, we can't even agree on whether it's acceptable to go out with a gun and shoot somebody in the street, as our former president famously said. So at the same time, your work implies kind of a normative approach to what is the good life, what is being a better human being, and so on. So I wonder if you could say something about that. Maybe say something to my pessimistic former
Yeah.
philosophy preceptor.
Yeah. So I would say two things. Number one is that, and this is something that I learned from being a stock analyst, is that there's always two sides to a market, right? There's people who believe that a stock at any given time is a sell and a stock is a
Right.
buy. And so one of the things I realized is that I decide, like, what do I think it's going to be? Do I think it's a buy? Do I think it's a sell? So at some level, we are making a choice about what worldview we want to have. Do we want to view things as they are going to be positive? I mean, there's some great work of the behavioral economics that said, in part, the Depression happened 100 years ago, and Schiller, I think it was, the Depression came 100 years ago because we started to believe that a depression was going to come.
Mhm.
So I do think there's some element of, we're going to get the future that we predict that we will get, that we expect that we will get. So that's one thing I would say, is just from a pure sort of, if you believe it, it will happen. But the second thing is, and that you're hinting at, is that I have a very strong faith that there is a superior providential being. I believe in God. I believe that things will all work out in the end. And some people may not share that worldview, but my optimism stems from that.
Right, but then there are people who are looking for the caliphate, right, which is kind of a little bit orthogonal to the notion of Judeo-Christian theology. I mean, so
actually, you know what? Let me back up. I think what I would say, John, is that I am happy when I hear of anyone who believes in a higher power, whatever religion,
whatever format.
Whatever format, because I believe that when we believe that we are subject to something greater than we are, we behave differently. So I actually don't care what
color of religion
I
it is.
don't.
Yeah.
No.
Good. Okay. I get it.
Yeah.
That made me think of something too, that I would say that the times could be somewhat described as chaotic, and civil unrest, I think, is maybe a nice way to put it. And the question I asked earlier about sort of that moral center and how it's shifted, maybe without our even knowing, or our ability to see it. The micro disruptions, I'm a full believer in that. I've also noticed, though, to John's pessimistic friend, which reminds me of that quote, always borrow money from a pessimist because they don't expect to get it paid back.
I've never heard that before. That's good.
Is this idea of what happens when people don't realize that they could benefit from that, from a human potential thing. In fact, what we're seeing so much of now in this greater experiment of social media is this sort of radicalization, if you will, in pushing people into trajectories where they don't even realize how far they might have been pushed in a different direction. And I wonder, what can we do in two ways? One is to sort of keep our guard up and prevent that from happening, because we're with every new network technology algorithm, that threat is there. And then the second one is, is there a possibility to just wake up and say, "Whoa, what am I doing?" Or is that even possible?
I think that happened, at least I think that happened for me a bit, and I suspect for a lot of people last year with the murder of George Floyd, of just like, for me as being white, is just like, whoa, like I believe that I got it, and I realized I did not get it at all. And so I do think we sometimes have these experiences, like you were saying, that wake up call of like, your worldview is inaccurate and not useful, and quite possibly wrong. So I do think that sometimes we are fortunate in that we have this experience that really jars us awake and helps us see things differently. And we want to be grateful for those.
Yeah, well, that was, especially when we talk about the challenges with many of these things being so systemic, is that they're so systemic that you don't even realize it until you do something and someone calls you on it. And then that's an example of just how deep these things go. And I think we have a lot of work to do there. But on the other note too, then how do we keep our guard up, so that we are more conscious? And maybe, look, I think, to quote the great philosopher Kendrick Lamar, we do have to be humble. And it's hard when everything that's around us, everything tells us we're the most important person in this world, and you can't help but feed off of that and start to
Brian,
ahead,
I
Whitney,
think
sorry.
one of the ways that we can keep our guard up is that we can just ask ourselves, when was the last time I got feedback from anyone in any situation? And if we're not getting feedback from anybody about anything, that means that people don't think we're feedback givable. I just totally made up that word.
Trademark it.
They're not going to give you any information, and so you know that you're in trouble because you're about to stagnate, because no one either cares enough or believes that you will listen enough to tell you anything different than what you already believe. Oh, Michelle totally agrees. Oh, about something else. Cool. I thought you totally agreed with what I just said, Michelle, about the
I agree. I agree with what you
feedback.
just said, Michelle, and also Whitney. And I'll turn that into a comment so I can put it up online. I mean, I guess that's the feedback is so it's fear inducing and stress inducing in some ways, but it's also a gift. You get to see how you get, it's like that old adage, treat people how you want to be treated, but also treat people how they want to be treated. It's this line of empathy that you cross. I call it the undercover boss moment. And when when you watch that show, there's always that moment. Here you go, Whitney. Just
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you for the feedback, Michelle. I appreciate it.
that you see things a certain way until you have to see them through. You have to feel them through the eyes and emotions of another, and that's a powerful form of feedback as well. And I don't think we give ourselves enough of that time either.
Yeah.
But let's see, John. I mean, we're pretty much out of time, so I'll turn it over to you for the last question and bring it home.
Well, I don't know that we can put a neat bow on this conversation, but it seems to me that a lot of what we've talked about reflects a new aspiration to a kind of humanism in business that's definitely different from an industrial model, which sees people as interchangeable functions within a large, mechanical organization. The real challenge, from my perspective, and we've talked about it, it's an open question, is how we actually, walk the talk of becoming more humanistic, empathetic, growth-oriented, compassionate, psychologically minded, emotionally intelligent individuals, leaders, and organizations, and how we scale that from great thought leaders like Whitney to a mass phenomenon. Because ultimately, if it doesn't scale, it's going to be just a kind of nice to have on the part of a few people, and that's obviously not going to move the needle.
We need global innovation evangelists, John.
Well, we've got a couple. We got 3 of them here, so we ought to form a mastermind group and figure out.
There you go, and then we can jam.
Take over the world. So with that, I think it leaves. It's just left to me to thank you, thank you, Whitney. I mean, it's been a great conversation, and obviously food for thought. And look forward to the sequel.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you. And thank you to Michelle. I know you were about to thank Michelle, so we'll thank Michelle and Carol and Peter as well. Thank you. This was really fun and very fun to we did a little jazz, I would say, gentlemen.
Oh, yeah. Conversation is jazz.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I certainly feel all the richer for it. And Whitney, what a gift! What a gift to be able to spend this time with you. I miss you in person, and look forward to looking forward to just growing and learning. And just being around you is a wonderful start. We're going to make sure that we promote Smart Growth. You can pre-order it now. We look forward to its 2022 release. Whitney, thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
What a wonderful conversation, John. I have goosebumps. I feel so positive, which I guess I need it anyway. I need that energy because right after this, I'm going to go get mic'd up and see what happens after that.
Oh my goodness. You're going to improvise. Do a little intellectual jazz. It speaks to the value of sometimes having more in-depth conversations with people, so anyway, different strokes for different folks, but that was about 50 minutes of conversation with Whitney, and it went by like a flash.
It actually did. It really did. Well, John, I always appreciate these times with you. Always, I just so I feel spoiled in a regard that we get to jam and we get to jam with some amazing people, and it's like its own little university. It's like a master class, I guess,
Yeah.
in many ways. So, John, I
Well,
wish you
yes.
well. I'll
Thank you.
see
Same to
you.
you.
I'll see you next week. And thank you everybody for joining us every week as you do. We appreciate it. We appreciate your commentary and your engagement. Please do. Please do spend time at intersectionslive.com. I mean, there are conversations like this on every topic that are just so transformative and inspiring. There for your access at no charge. And we will see you next Thursday at 10:30 a.m. Pacific. John, I'll see you then. I'll see you then.